The mahogany study of the Moreno mansion absorbs sound like a tomb. Rain hammers against the floor-to-ceiling windows, each drop a percussion against glass, and the room smells of leather and old money and the particular coldness that comes only at 3:36 in the morning when the world has stopped pretending to be anything other than what it is. Salvatore Moreno sits motionless behind his desk. He is 47 years old but carries himself like a man who stopped aging somewhere around 30, broad-shouldered in a black silk shirt unbuttoned at the collar, revealing the kind of chest that comes from power rather than gyms. His dark hair has silvered at the temples like frost settling on stone. A scar runs from the corner of his left eye down to his cheekbone, thin and precise as a blade's edge, and his eyes, storm grey and hollow, fix on a single point in the darkness beyond the windows. In his right hand, a crystal tumbler of bourbon. In his left, a gold ring bearing the Moreno crest. He has not blinked in 4 minutes. Rocco stands to his left. 28 years old, built like a wall in a charcoal suit, his shaved head catching the lamplight. Franco occupies the right side of the desk, older by 5 years, with the kind of face that breaks bones for a living and has never apologized for any of it. Both men wear the expression of guards at a tomb, still, watchful, ready for any disturbance of the dead. The back door to the study flies open. She staggers through like a ghost learning to walk. Isabella Hartley, 34 years old but looking closer to 50, collapses against the mahogany desk with a sound like a body hitting concrete. Her black and white maid's uniform is torn at the shoulder, revealing a thin collarbone and skin the color of old paper. Rain and blood soak through the fabric. Her hair, once dark, now matted against her face, plasters to her cheeks in wet ropes. A cut above her left eye bleeds steadily. Her lower lip is split, swollen into something that barely resembles a mouth. Her hands shake as they grip the desk's edge. Salvatore rises slowly. In 15 years, Rocco and Franco have never seen him move with anything less than absolute control, but this movement is different, jerky, almost disjointed, like a puppet remembering how its strings work. His chair rolls backward and hits the wall with a soft sound swallowed instantly by thunder outside. "Get her water." His voice comes out rough, like he is speaking through gravel. "Get the doctor." "Sir, she's soaked in blood." "We don't know," Franco begins. "I don't care what we don't know." Salvatore moves around the desk, and both men instinctively reach for weapons before realizing their hands have no target. "Get the doctor." Franco leaves without another word. Rocco does not move. He watches his boss actually kneel, on one knee, his $1,000 suit absorbing blood from the floor, beside a woman who looks like she was pulled from a dumpster. Her breathing comes in short, wounded gasps. She cannot focus her eyes. Isabella's hand trembles as she reaches into the front pocket of her uniform. The pocket is torn. What emerges from it, even drenched in rain and blood, catches the lamplight with a soft golden gleam. A locket. Small enough to fit in the center of her palm. The chain is broken. "Your son," she whispers. The words come out through a mouth that will not cooperate with speech. "Micah. The fire. 3 months ago. I pulled him out of the burning shelter. He's alive." Salvatore goes absolutely still. For 5 seconds, the only sound is the rain against the windows and Isabella's ragged breathing and the soft drip of water from the hem of her torn uniform onto the carpet. His hand reaches out, hovering an inch from the locket, but he does not touch it. His fingers hang suspended in the air like he is afraid the moment will break if his skin makes contact. "Say it again," he says quietly. "Your son is alive," Isabella repeats. Her voice is barely a whisper, thin as a candle in the wind. "Micah. That's how I know. That's how I can prove it. He showed me this locket. He said his mother gave it to him. He said his father was the man who kept people safe. He kept asking me where his father was. He kept asking why his father didn't come find him." The locket drops from her hand and lands on the carpet with a sound like a heartbeat stopping. Salvatore reaches for it, and his hand, scarred, tattooed, a hand that has ordered men into impossible violence, picks up a small gold circle the size of a child's wish. He opens it. Inside, a photograph so faded it is barely visible anymore. A small boy. Salvatore Moreno at age 21. A woman with kind eyes. The three of them on the steps of a church. Rocco takes one step back. In 15 years, he has seen his boss do terrible things. He has seen him order men to disappear. He has seen him stand motionless while buildings burned. He has never seen him cry. But the man kneeling on the floor is not the boss anymore. He is just a father, and his shoulders have begun to shake like the floor has cracked open beneath him. Isabella's legs give out completely. She slides down the desk, leaving a blood smear across the polished wood like a signature. She sits on the floor, and when she speaks again, her voice breaks into pieces. They want $200,000, she says. In 7 days. Or they take my children. All of them. They want me to pay for the fire. They say I am responsible. They say I stole something. I didn't steal anything. I don't steal. I just work. I just try to feed my babies. I only have $200 left in the world. Everything else burned. Everything. She starts to cry, but her tears are silent. This is a woman whose body has forgotten how to cry loudly. The tears slide down her face without sound, mixing with the blood from her lip and the rain in her hair, and she sits there on the floor of Salvatore Moreno's study at 3:02 in the morning with her hands open and empty in her lap. Salvatore does not move. He holds the locket in both hands like it is made of something more fragile than gold. His knuckles have turned white. When he finally speaks, his voice sounds like it comes from a place deeper than his chest, deeper than his heart, from somewhere that has been sealed off for 3 months. Who did this to you? Isabella shakes her head slowly. It doesn't matter who. It matters that Micah is safe. That's all that matters. That your son is safe and alive and asking for his father. But what Isabella does not understand is that the man staring at her with those hollowed storm-grey eyes has spent the last 93 days convinced his only child was dead. He has made funeral arrangements in his mind. He has written a eulogy that he will never speak aloud. He has stood in the rain in the dark and asked God questions that God does not answer. And she has just handed him back his son and a reason to stop asking those questions. She does not understand that what happens next will be swift and precise and merciless. Before we continue, drop a like if this story hits you. Share it with someone who needs to hear it and subscribe so you don't miss what's coming tomorrow. Now, let us go back to the beginning to understand how a woman with $200 and a maid's uniform walked through the gates of this mansion and changed everything. The calendar marks June 10th, 3 months before the blood on Salvatore's study floor. The streets of New Orleans sweat through their clothes. The humidity hangs in the air like a living thing, thick enough to choke on, and the sun beats down on the old neighborhoods where people work 2 jobs and still cannot afford the rent. Isabella Hartley stands in a kitchen that is not her own, counting money into her palm with the precision of someone who has counted money into their palm 10,000 times before. $20. $35. $18. The pile grows slowly. In her hand, she holds $207. This is what separates her family from the street. She is thin in the way that hunger creates thinness, not the fashionable kind but the kind that speaks of calories counted and meals skipped. Her uniform, black and white, purchased second-hand, washed so many times the color has begun to fade, hangs on her frame. Her hair is pulled back so tightly it gives her a headache, but there is no money for loose strands and unprofessionalism. Her hands show her age more than her face does. The skin is weathered, the knuckles swollen from arthritis that started too early, the fingernails broken short. A faded scar runs along her left wrist, thin and white, the kind of scar that comes from holding the past so tightly you cut yourself. Around her neck hangs a small gold locket on a chain that is not broken yet but will be. She touches it unconsciously while she counts the money, the way someone touches a prayer when they are out of faith. "Mama, I'm hungry." The voice comes from the kitchen doorway. "Sophia." 7 years old, with her mother's dark eyes and her father's stubbornness, wearing a school uniform from a public school that does not have enough books. Beside her stands Marcus, 5 years old, holding a stuffed rabbit that has lost one eye and both ears. They stand in the doorway like they are afraid to step into the kitchen and make the day harder than it already is. Isabella turns and smiles. The smile costs her something. It is the kind of smile a mother makes when she has no food but her children need to see her not be afraid. She extends her hand. In the center of her palm sit $3. Go to Mrs. Chen's store down the street, she says. Buy bread and peanut butter. Tell her it is for me. She will give you a good price. And buy an apple. Just one. You can share it. Sophia takes the $3 very carefully, like it is made of something that might break. What will you eat, Mama? I have coffee and a sandwich at work. Go, before it gets too hot. When the children leave, Isabella sits down at the kitchen table and counts again. $204. She subtracts the $3 she just gave away. $201. She adds back $1 from yesterday's tips that she found in the pocket of her other uniform. $202. She has 4 days until the rent is due. Rent is $850. She has made $430 this month. If she picks up the Sunday shift, she might make it to $600. She might have $250 left over, but she will spend that on utilities and food and the medicine Marcus needs for his asthma, which costs $67 per inhaler. The apartment is small, 2 bedrooms and a kitchen the size of a closet, and the landlord has already given notice once that if she is late again, he will rent to someone else. There is no one else. This is the cheapest apartment she has found. The next one down is not cheaper but farther away, which means longer on the bus, which costs more in gas money that she does not have because she does not have a car. She takes the bus to work. The bus takes 37 minutes. She takes it twice a day. That is 1 hour and 14 minutes of her life spent on the number 8 bus, sitting in plastic seats that smell like cleaning fluid, watching the city pass by outside windows that do not open. She works 6 days a week at a restaurant called Moreno's. It is not the kind of restaurant where people go for the food, though the food is passable. It is the kind of restaurant where business deals happen, where old money meets new money, where men in suits that cost more than everything Isabella owns sit at corner tables and discuss things that shape the city. She carries plates. She refills water glasses. She smiles when people snap their fingers instead of raising their hand. She pretends not to hear when they call her the Hartley girl like she is something that belongs to someone else. Last night, a man left her a $2 tip on a $78 meal. Before he left, he pulled her aside by the elbow, not rough, but firm, and told her that her son needed a haircut, that she was letting the boy go wild, that a mother who cared would keep her child groomed. She did not tell him that Marcus's hair had been cut 3 months ago in a kitchen with scissors meant for opening boxes because she could not afford a barber. She smiled. She said thank you. She put the $2 in her pocket and went back to work. The manager's name is Derek Collins. He is 42 years old with the kind of face that has been angry since childhood and is not planning to stop now. He is 5'9" but carries himself like a taller man, shoulders back, chin forward, eyes always narrowed like he is trying to solve a problem that has no solution and it offends him personally. He wears a suit, always, but the suit is worn at the elbows. His watch is a Rolex, stolen, which Isabella overheard him telling another server last month. His shoes are polished but the soles are separating from the leather, and he walks with a slight shuffle that he corrects with aggression directed at anyone nearby. Derek Coleman has been stealing from the restaurant for 3 years. Isabella knows this because she has worked at Moreno's for 2 years and 8 months, and in that time, she has watched the cash drawer come up short. She has watched him pocket tips from the register. She has watched him take expensive bottles of wine from the cellar and sell them to a man who comes by on Tuesday afternoons in a car with New York plates. She has watched all of this and said nothing because saying something would mean losing her job, and losing her job means losing the apartment, and losing the apartment means her children go into the system, which is a thing Isabella has nightmares about. It is a fear that tastes like copper in her mouth. 3 months ago, the night of the fire, Derek disappeared for 16 hours. He came back soaking wet, with a burn on his left arm that he did not explain, and his eyes held something that looked like fear but also something like relief. The next morning, the news reported a fire at the Riverside shelter for children. 15 children were evacuated. 12 adults were injured. The cause was under investigation, but police suspected arson. Isabella heard the address on the morning news while she was making breakfast for her own children, and something in her chest went cold. She knew that shelter. She had taken Marcus there once, 2 years ago, when the fever started, and she thought she might have to give him up because she could not afford the medicine. The shelter had referred her to a charity clinic instead, and the clinic had given her samples, and somehow she had kept her son. But she knew people who worked there. She knew the children who lived there. The thought that Derek might be connected to the fire made her sick in a way that had nothing to do with hunger. But that was 3 months ago. Now, Isabella sits in her kitchen and counts $202, and she does not think about fires or Derek Collins or anything except the simple math of survival. A sound interrupts her counting. The sound of a car engine. Not a bus engine, not a neighbor's car, but something expensive and heavy and expensive. The kind of engine that makes dogs bark and curtains move in windows. Isabella freezes. The money sits on the table in front of her. She does not move to hide it because there is nowhere to hide $200 that a person searching will not find. The engine cuts off. Footsteps. 2 sets of footsteps on the stairs. They stop outside her door. The knock comes with the sound of fist against wood, not a request for permission but an announcement of arrival. The knock comes with the sound of fist against wood, not a request for permission but an announcement of arrival. Isabella's hands freeze above the bills. $202. Everything she has in the world sits exposed on a kitchen table that wobbles on 3 legs. Coming, she calls, her voice smaller than she intends. She moves to the door and opens it to find 2 men in dark suits standing in the hallway. Not police. Something worse. The taller one has a scar running from his left eye to his jaw like a crack in stone. The other man's neck is thick as a tree trunk, and his knuckles bear the marks of 1,000 small violences. Isabella Hartley, the scarred man, asks. Her mouth goes dry. Yes? Derek Collins sent us. He says you owe him $200,000. The words do not make sense in English. She hears the individual sounds but they do not arrange themselves into meaning. I don't understand. The fire at the shelter 3 months ago. The one that made the news. That was arson. Derek set it to cover his embezzlement from Bella Not. $197,000 missing from the restaurant accounts. The fire was supposed to destroy the records. But someone called the fire department before the records burned. Someone stopped him. Isabella's legs forget how to hold her upright. Derek knows you were at the shelter that day. He knows you made that call. Which means you cost him $197,000, plus $3,000 in property damage to the warehouse where he stored stolen equipment. $200,000, exact. He's giving you 7 days to pay it. If you don't, he takes your children. All 3 of them. He has a contact at Child Protective Services. 1 phone call and they disappear into the system. Gone. Forever. The scarred man places a white envelope on her kitchen table, right next to her $200, like a mockery. 7 days, Isabella. Derek doesn't negotiate. He doesn't forgive. He waits. The men turn and walk out. The sound of their footsteps echoes down the stairwell, heavy and final, like a countdown clock. Isabella stands alone in her kitchen. The envelope sits there. She does not open it. She does not need to. The message is complete. The mathematics of her destruction are simple and absolute. $200. $200,000. 7 days. 3 children who depend on her to keep them safe, and she has no way to do either. She sits down at the table and puts her head in her hands. The gold locket in her pocket presses against her ribs like a second heartbeat, like a reminder of the last person who loved her without condition, and that person has been dead for 4 years. Meanwhile, across the city in the Garden District, Salvatore Moreno sits in his office on the 3rd floor of his mansion, reading a report that has just arrived via courier. The office smells like old money and older violence. Dark wood paneling covers the walls. A portrait of a woman who might have been his mother hangs above the fireplace, her eyes following him even in stillness. Salvatore is 52 years old, though something in his face suggests he has lived many more lives than that. His hair is dark with silver at the temples. A scar runs from his left eye to his jaw, a souvenir from a betrayal he has never forgotten and will never forgive. He wears a cashmere coat over an open white shirt, revealing a chest covered in tattoos that tell stories only certain people can read. A gold Rolex catches the light on his left wrist. His hands are large and scarred, the hands of a man who has built an empire by understanding that mercy and weakness are the same thing. His lieutenant, Rocco, stands by the window. Rocco is 46 and loyal in the way that comes from surviving 15 years of Salvatore's absolute authority. He watches his boss read the report, and he sees the moment the words register. Something shifts in Salvatore's eyes, a cold and terrible recognition. He found him in Covington, Rocco says quietly. The boy, I mean. Living with a foster family for the past 8 weeks. The foster mother called the police when she realized who he was. But before they arrived, someone took him. A woman. She was working at the house, cleaning. She just took him and disappeared. Salvatore does not look up from the report. A woman. Security footage shows her putting him in an old Camry. Yellow, late 1990s. No plates we can trace. She drove north toward the city. After that, nothing. Salvatore closes his eyes. Micah. His brother's son. The boy he has been searching for since the moment his brother Victor made the worst decision of his life. 3 months. 92 days of not knowing if the child was alive or dead, if he was being hurt, if he still remembered his father's name. Find the woman, Salvatore says, and his voice sounds like thunder rolling across a still night. Find out where she took him. And bring them both to me. The woman and the boy. Alive. I want to know why she took him, and I want to know where she's been keeping him. And if she doesn't cooperate. Salvatore finally looks up. His eyes are the color of storm clouds, and in them Rocco sees the reflection of a man who has built his entire life on the principle that resistance is simply delay before inevitable pain. Then you persuade her? Gently. He's a child, Rocco. He's been terrified for months. I don't want him any more traumatized than he already is. But the woman? She stole from me. She took something that belongs to me. That requires correction. Rocco nods and walks out, already reaching for his phone, already thinking through the networks that will help him find a woman in a yellow Camry who took a child that does not belong to her. 3 hours later, Rocco arrives at the small house on Dauphine Street where Isabella Hartley lives with her 3 children. The house is the color of old cream, with green shutters that sag slightly on their hinges. The neighborhood is the kind where people mind their own business and police visits are common enough that no one opens their curtains. Rocco parks his black SUV directly in front. He does not try to be subtle. Subtlety would be an insult to a woman who is already afraid. Isabella is in her bedroom, lying on a mattress on the floor, when she hears the car door slam. She knows immediately what it is. She has lived long enough to recognize the sound of a world closing in. She stands and goes to the window. Through the thin curtain, she sees a man in a dark suit standing on her front lawn. He is older, maybe mid-40s, with dark hair slicked back and a face that suggests he has spent his entire life making people regret small decisions. She walks downstairs slowly. The knock comes before she reaches the bottom step. When she opens the door, Rocco's eyes move over her in a single clinical sweep, categorizing, assessing, dismissing her as a threat. She is small. She is thin in the way of people who skip meals so children can eat. She wears a faded bathrobe over clothes that have been mended so many times they are more patched than original fabric. Isabella Hartley, he says. Not a question. Yes. You have something that belongs to Salvatore Moreno. A boy. Age 6. Dark hair. Name of Micah. You're going to tell me where he is, and you're going to do it right now. And if you make this difficult, I'm going to have to make phone calls that will result in your children being taken into state custody. Do you understand? Isabella's mouth tastes like copper. I don't have any boy here. Rocco steps inside without waiting for invitation. He is broad-shouldered and moves through the tiny living room like a shark in a bathtub, too large for the space, making it smaller just by existing in it. Where is he? Rocco asks again, and this time his voice carries no patience. You can search, Isabella says. He's not here. Rocco does search. He opens closets and looks under beds. He finds Emma and Lucas in the back bedroom, hiding together on a mattress, their eyes wide with the particular terror of children learning that the world is not safe. He finds no Micah. When he comes back downstairs, his expression has shifted slightly. Not to doubt, but to recalibration. You took him from Covington. Security footage shows your vehicle. I don't own a car. Yellow Camry. 1998. You don't own it, fine. You borrowed it. Where would you have taken a child you stole from Salvatore Moreno's family? Isabella stands very still. The gold locket presses against her chest. She thinks about Micah's voice asking her not to tell anyone he was there. She thinks about the way he had clung to her when she read him stories, like she was the only solid thing in a world of falling apart. I helped him, she says quietly. That's all I did. He was scared. He needed help. Rocco's phone rings. He answers it without breaking eye contact with Isabella. He listens to whatever voice comes through the other end, and then he nods and hangs up. Salvatore wants to see you, he says. Come with me. My children. We'll stay here. For now. Get in the car. The drive through New Orleans takes 20 minutes. The city moves past the windows in a blur of street corners and people and lives that have nothing to do with hers. Rocco does not speak. The silence is its own kind of interrogation. The mansion rises into view like something from another world. 3 stories of pale stone and wrought iron, surrounded by oak trees that have been standing for longer than anyone can remember. There are gardens with fountains. There are statues. There are cameras mounted on every corner. Rocco parks in a circular driveway and escorts Isabella inside. They walk through a marble foyer where her footsteps echo, and then up a staircase that curves like the spine of something alive. They pass a library where Isabella catches a glimpse of floor-to-ceiling books, and then they arrive at a heavy wooden door. Rocco knocks twice and enters without waiting for a response. Salvatore Moreno is standing at a window, looking out over the garden where his mother used to walk. He does not turn around immediately. When he does, Isabella sees the scar and thinks of violence and old pain and the kind of beauty that only comes from surviving things that should have killed you. You took my nephew, he says. Isabella does not deny it. He has been missing for 3 months. His father kidnapped him. I have been searching for him everywhere. And I find out that a woman who works in my own house took him from the hospital where they found him. Why would you do that? Isabella's voice comes out steady, though her hands are shaking. Because he was terrified. Because no one was asking him what he wanted. Because he was just a child in the middle of a war he didn't understand, and he needed someone to put him first instead of using him as a weapon. I kept him safe. I fed him. I let him sleep without nightmares for maybe 3 weeks, and in those 3 weeks, he started to smile again. Salvatore stares at her. In his eyes, she sees him calculating, assessing, trying to understand how a maid in his house, someone so small that people walk through rooms without seeing her, could have the audacity to steal from him. Where is he now? He asks. with a woman named Mrs. Chen. She runs the riverside shelter. She's been hiding him there, keeping him safe, letting him be a child instead of a casualty. Rocco steps forward, ready to move, but Salvatore raises a single hand and Rocco stops immediately. The obedience is absolute and instantaneous. "You know what happens to people who take things from me," Salvatore says. "Yes," Isabella says. "But I also know what happens to children who become bargaining chips. I've seen it. I've lived through it. And I couldn't let that happen to him. So yes. I took him. I stole him from your family because your family was already using him to hurt each other." The room fills with silence so heavy it has weight. "What is your name?" Salvatore asks. "Isabella Hartley." "And where do you live, Isabella Hartley?" She tells him. Salvatore walks back to the window. His shoulders are very broad. His silhouette against the glass is the shape of a man who carries the weight of absolute power, and the loneliness that comes with it. "Find Micah," he says to Rocco. "Bring him here. And leave the woman with me." Rocco nods and leaves. When they are alone, Salvatore turns back to Isabella. "Sit down," he says, and she sits in a chair that costs more than her entire apartment. "Tell me about my nephew," he says. "Tell me about Micah." And Isabella does. She tells him about a boy who was so afraid that he hid under beds. She tells him about how slowly the fear had receded. She tells him about the color drawings he made for her, pictures of a house that was not on fire, pictures of the sun, pictures of someone who looked like him and someone who looked like her, standing together, safe. Salvatore listens without moving. His hands are clasped in front of him. His expression does not change. But when she finishes, his eyes are glistening, and she realizes that this man, this absolute man, this man who commands violence and loyalty and empires, is on the edge of tears that he will not allow to fall. "You saved him," he says finally. "I just kept him alive until someone could save him properly." Salvatore stands and walks to the portrait of the woman above the fireplace. "My mother used to say that the invisible people see more than anyone else. They watch because no one is watching them. They understand kindness because they have been denied it so many times. She believed that invisible people changed the world more than kings." He turns back to Isabella. "How much money do you need?" The question is so sudden, so unexpected, that she does not immediately answer. "Derek Collins has threatened your children if you cannot pay him $200,000 in 7 days. How much do you need to disappear? To leave the city with your children and start somewhere safe?" Isabella's voice comes out as barely a whisper. "More than I could ever make in a lifetime." "Then you do not owe Derek Collins anything anymore," Salvatore says. "And Derek Collins will learn what happens to people who threaten children in my city." He picks up a phone and makes a single call. He speaks 4 words, "Handle the restaurant manager." Then he hangs up and looks at Isabella with an expression that is gentle in a way that seems impossible for a face so scarred by violence. "Your children will be safe," he says. "And you are no longer invisible." The rain fell in sheets that night, turning the courtyard into a mirror of chaos. Isabella lay on wet stone, her body curled into itself like something broken, her uniform torn and stained with blood that looked black under the mansion's outdoor lights. 15 minutes had passed since Derek's men left her there. 15 minutes of trying to breathe through ribs that screamed with each inhale. Her mother's gold locket lay in a puddle 3 feet away, and she could not reach it yet. She could barely move. When her trembling hands finally found the strength, Isabella pushed herself upright against the stone wall. Every muscle protested. Every breath felt like swallowing glass. She retrieved the locket from the water, pressed it against her chest, and stumbled back toward the mansion's service entrance. Her black shoes left wet footprints on the marble floors. Her left eye was already swelling shut. She did not know where she was going. Only that she needed to find him. Only that in this moment, there was nowhere else to run. Salvatore Moreno sat in his study at 3:02 in the morning, the blue glow of his desk lamp casting shadows across papers he could not focus on. Security reports lay spread before him. Accounts. Numbers. The usual weight of empire that never felt as heavy as it did tonight. He had not slept in 36 hours. Since the moment Micah walked through the foyer doors covered in rain and salvation, Salvatore had been awake, replaying every second, understanding finally what he had believed impossible: his son was alive. The boy slept in a room directly above this one. Salvatore could almost feel him through the ceiling, breathing, safe, real. But his mind kept returning to Isabella Hartley, the woman with calloused hands and tired eyes who had kept his son alive when she had nothing to feed herself. Who had risked everything for a stranger's child. He had sent her away at the restaurant, given her the business card, told her to come tomorrow. But there was something in her voice when she spoke about Derek Collins that had not left him. Desperation shaped differently than normal fear. The kind of desperation that came from losing everything already and knowing what it meant to fall further. The sound came without warning. A crash, distant, followed by footsteps that were wrong, unsteady, dragging. Salvatore's hand moved toward the gun in his desk drawer before his mind caught up. The footsteps grew closer, echoing through the corridor outside his study. Then the door burst open. Isabella stood in the doorway like something that had survived a shipwreck. Her uniform hung in pieces. Blood ran from her split lip and the cut above her right eye. Her left hand clutched something small and metal. But it was her remaining eye that held his attention, wide, terrified, but still moving, still searching. "Micah," she said. Her voice came out shattered, like glass breaking underwater. "The fire. He's alive. You found him." Salvatore stood slowly. "Isabella. What happened to you?" "Derek. His men. They came after." She swayed. Salvatore moved around the desk before she could fall, catching her elbow. Her skin was ice under his palm. $200,000 in 7 days. That's what he said. He set the fire. Covered his tracks. And now he wants me to take the blame, or he takes my children. Emma and Lucas. He knows where they stay. He knows everything. The words came in fragments, between gasps for breath. Salvatore guided her to the leather chair beside his desk and helped her sit. His touch was careful, deliberate, the way a man might handle something precious and fragile. "Show me," he said. Isabella opened her trembling hand. The gold locket lay in her palm, water dripping from its edges. Even drenched and damaged, it caught the lamplight. "My mother's," Isabella whispered. "The only thing I have left of her. When I was young, she told me that no matter how dark things became, I had to keep this close. Because gold reflects light. And light always finds a way through the darkness." Salvatore took the locket carefully and placed it on his desk. Then he turned to look at her fully, at the bruises already spreading across her face, at the way she held her left side, at the absolute absence of hope in her eyes. In 15 years, Rocco had never seen his boss move like this. The man was deliberate by nature, controlled, every gesture measured and economical. But when Rocco and Franco arrived at the study at 3:52 a.m. because their boss had summoned them with a single word, now, they found Salvatore kneeling beside Isabella Hartley, examining her injuries with hands that were surprisingly gentle for a man who had broken bones with those same hands. "Get Dr. Moretti," Salvatore said without looking up. "Tell him to come to the East Wing. And bring ice, bandages, water. Now." Franco disappeared. Rocco lingered in the doorway. "You know this woman?" Rocco asked carefully. "She saved my son," Salvatore said. He lifted Isabella's chin to examine the cut above her eye. "And Derek Collins beat her because he is afraid. Which means he is aware that I know what he has done. Which means we move tonight." Isabella tried to pull away. "Sir, you don't owe me." "In my city," Salvatore said, his voice dropping lower, becoming something darker and more dangerous than any gun. "When someone threatens a child, I do owe a debt. To God, if nothing else." "And you?" He looked directly at her. You kept my son alive when you had nothing. That is a debt I will spend the rest of my life repaying." The sound of Rocco's footsteps echoed down the corridor as he left to gather supplies. Outside, the rain continued its assault on the windows. And in that study, under the blue glow of a desk lamp, a woman who had believed herself invisible finally felt seen. Dr. Moretti arrived within 20 minutes. He worked quietly, taping Isabella's ribs while she sat still as stone, her mother's locket clutched against her chest. 2 of them were cracked, not broken. The black eye would be spectacular but temporary. The bruises would fade in 2 weeks. She had been lucky, in the way that people beaten by professional men could be said to be lucky. The blows had missed anything vital. "Rest," the doctor told her. "And ice every 2 hours." When he left, Salvatore did not leave with him. He remained in the study while Isabella sat in a leather chair, her body finally releasing the adrenaline that had carried her through the rain, through the corridors, through the confession. "You should have let him kill me," Isabella said quietly. "He's going to come back. Derek. He won't stop." "Yes," Salvatore agreed. "He will come back. But he will not find you here." At 4:44 a.m., in a restaurant basement 5 blocks away, Derek Collins received a phone call. The voice on the other end was calm, Italian-accented, and spoke only 4 words: "Handle the restaurant manager." Derek knew what that meant. He had worked in this city long enough to understand the vocabulary of the mafia. Handle did not mean fire. It did not mean intimidate. It meant remove from the equation entirely. It meant that someone had spoken his name to Salvatore Moreno, and Salvatore Moreno had decided that Derek Collins was a problem that needed solving. He ran. Out the back of the restaurant, into his car, toward the highway that led out of New Orleans. He made it as far as Baton Rouge before the black SUVs caught him. For vehicles. 8 men in suits that cost more than Derek's car. They did not draw weapons. They did not need to. They simply placed him under arrest on federal charges: embezzlement, arson, attempted extortion, kidnapping, threats against minor children. By dawn, Derek Collins was in a holding cell facing 40 years in federal prison. But what Isabella did not know, as she finally slept in a guest room on the 2nd floor of Salvatore's mansion, her mother's locket on the nightstand beside her, was that Evelyn Blackwell had seen Derek's arrest. Had understood that Isabella Hartley had somehow become important enough to Salvatore Moreno to warrant his intervention. And Evelyn Blackwell, who had spent 20 years cultivating her position as the wealthiest, most connected woman in New Orleans, could not tolerate the idea of being replaced by a poor maid in a black and white uniform. The next morning, Evelyn would move against Isabella with a cruelty that no one in that mansion could have anticipated. But for now, in the rain-soaked darkness before dawn, Isabella Hartley slept soundly for the first time in 3 months, knowing that her children were safe, that her mother's gold locket was within arm's reach, and that sometimes the invisible people who save others from the darkness are saved in return by someone willing to stand in the light beside them. The morning light filtered through rain-soaked windows as Isabella woke in the guest room on the 2nd floor of Salvatore's mansion, her mother's gold locket resting on the nightstand beside her. She had slept without nightmares for the first time in 3 months. Her hand reached across the soft sheets and found the locket, its weight familiar, grounding, real. She dressed in the simple black dress Salvatore had sent to her apartment that morning. It fit perfectly. Of course it did. Everything about this world fit perfectly except her. At 7:08 p.m., the private dining room at Bella Knot restaurant hummed with the quiet power of 12 men in dark suits. They represented the families that controlled everything from Memphis to Mobile, from Baton Rouge to the Bayou. Salvatore sat at the head of the table, his gray eyes steady, his white shirt open at the collar revealing the gold chain he never removed. His cashmere coat, worth more than Isabella had earned in 5 years, hung on the chair behind him. Isabella entered on Salvatore's left. Rocco pulled out her chair. The lieutenants exchanged glances. In 15 years, none of them had seen him seat a woman at this table. Not a wife. Not a business partner. Not anyone. The first course arrived. Silence held. Then conversation resumed, the deals and territories flowing between men who had learned survival through ruthlessness. Isabella kept her eyes on her plate, on the wine she did not drink, on the weight of eyes that slid past her like she was still invisible. At 7:36 p.m., the restaurant doors burst open. Evelyn Blackwell walked in wearing diamonds and fury. Behind her came a camera crew from Channel 8 News, their equipment moving like a predator seeking prey. The clicking of heels on marble. The hum of cameras powering on. Silence fell like a blade through butter. Evelyn approached Salvatore's table with her smile sharp as broken glass. "Salvatore, darling," she said loudly enough for the cameras to catch every word. "I think everyone in this city should know about your new companion." She turned to the cameras. To the watching city. To the phones that were already recording in 100 hands. "Isabella Hartley," Evelyn continued, holding up documents that caught the camera lights. "Convicted of fraud 5 years ago. Currently under investigation for connections to organized crime. She has been systematically planting herself in your life, using your son to manipulate you into protecting her criminal enterprise." The restaurant held its breath. Isabella's hands trembled. The fraud conviction was real. She had written bad checks to pay for Emma's medicine when the fever reached 104 degrees and the hospital demanded payment up front. The organized crime connection was fabricated, a web of lies Evelyn had woven with surgical precision. But on live television, spoken with the authority of a woman who had never been questioned, it sounded damning. The allies whispered. Rocco's jaw clenched. Franco's hand moved toward his jacket before he stopped himself. "Look at her," Evelyn continued for the cameras, gesturing toward Isabella with theatrical disdain. A maid in a black and white uniform playing dress-up in a borrowed dress. "Did you really believe someone like you belonged in this world? That people like Salvatore Moreno would ever see you as anything but a servant?" The kitchen door swung open. Derek Collins emerged with a triumph in his eyes that made Isabella's stomach drop. His smile was the smile of a man who had coordinated this moment with precision. "It is all true," Derek announced. "She has been stealing from my restaurant. From Mr. Moreno's businesses. I have documentation. Proof." He held up papers that looked official, that looked damning, that looked like the end of everything. The cameras swung toward Isabella. Her face filled screens across New Orleans. At the daycare where Emma and Lucas waited, the workers watched on their phones. She saw her daughter's name being whispered. She saw her son being pointed at by children who suddenly understood that something was wrong with having a mother on television being called a criminal. Isabella stood. Her legs moved without permission from her mind. She turned toward the exit. Salvatore caught her wrist. Not rough. Gentle. But immovable as stone. "Where are you going?" His voice was quiet. "Only for her. I am destroying everything you have." "They are right. I do not belong here." The words cracked like glass in her throat. "Your son needs better than this. Better than me. Look at me, Isabella." She could not. She could not meet those eyes and lie about what she knew to be true. "Look at me," he repeated, and this time it was not a request but a command spoken with the weight of a man accustomed to obedience. Isabella's eyes found his. "My own brother betrayed me," Salvatore said, and his voice carried across the silent restaurant into the cameras, into the homes of 100,000 people watching live. "He sold our family to enemies for money that meant nothing. I had to choose between mercy and survival. I chose survival. I killed my brother to protect what was mine. For 3 years, that choice haunted me like a curse that could not be erased." He stood. The movement was slow, deliberate, a man moving through water. "Then Isabella saved my son asking nothing in return. She pulled a child she did not know from a burning shelter and she asked for no reward, no payment, no recognition. She showed me something I believed was dead inside me, mercy. Mercy without price. Mercy without condition. Mercy without reason except that it was the right thing to do." Salvatore turned to face the cameras directly. To face the city. To face the judgment of people who had seen him as a man incapable of anything but violence. "So I will be clear for every person watching this broadcast," he said, each word deliberate as a hammer striking an anvil. "Isabella Hartley saved my son's life. She is under my protection. Anyone who touches her, anyone who threatens her, anyone who speaks her name with disrespect answers to me personally." Is there any part of that statement that needs clarification? The restaurant was so quiet that the sound of rain against the windows became deafening. Evelyn's smile faltered. Derek took a step backward. But they had already set something in motion that could not be stopped. They had already crossed a line that had consequences measured in federal prison sentences and public humiliation. Isabella's hand remained in Salvatore's. But in her heart, something had broken. At 2:33 a.m., she stood alone on the Mississippi River Bridge. The summer thunderstorm had returned, lightning tearing across the sky like a blade wrapped in ice. Rain soaked through the black dress. Her mother's gold locket hung from her neck, wet and cold against her skin. She had $200 to her name. 7 days had become 6. Emma and Lucas were still in danger. Her face had been broadcast as a criminal across the city, into the homes of every person who might hire her, help her, believe in her. Salvatore's protection felt like a weight instead of a shelter. His kindness felt impossible to accept because accepting it meant destroying him. She opened her hand. The locket gleamed in the rain, catching the light of distant street lamps. In memory, her mother's voice echoed, "This locket was your grandmother's. It survived wars and floods and things that should have broken it. As long as you hold it, you are never alone." Isabella looked down at the black water. It would be so easy to let go. To stop fighting. To release the locket and disappear into darkness. Then she remembered, her mother had survived worse. She had survived worse. Micah had survived because she chose to help without knowing if she would survive the choice herself. She closed her fist around the locket. Turned away from the bridge. Walked back toward the mansion as the rain fell harder, as the lightning split the sky, as something inside her shifted from despair into defiance. By dawn, Salvatore had mobilized every resource he controlled. At 6:36 a.m., 24 men in black suits moved through New Orleans like ghosts. Rocco led 12 toward Derek Collins's apartment in the Marigny neighborhood. Franco led 12 toward Evelyn Blackwell's Garden District mansion where the oaks grew old and the money ran deeper than history. The apartment door exploded inward at 6:07 a.m. Derek was still in his underwear, his phone in his hand, his face shifting from confusion to terror as FBI agents in raid jackets flooded through the doorway like water finding every crack. Derek Collins, an agent announced, "You are under arrest for embezzlement, arson, attempted extortion, and making criminal threats against minor children." Rocco stood in the corner, immovable, watching as Derek's knees buckled. "No, no, no. This is a mistake. I can pay it back." Derek's voice climbed into panic. "I have money. I have connections. I can fix this." An agent held up a tablet. Bank records showed $200,000 funneled from Moreno businesses into Derek's accounts over 3 years. Security footage showed Derek pouring gasoline in the basement of Isabella's old apartment building, the flames consuming everything she had managed to save. Recorded phone calls to the debt collector detailing the payment schedule. Text messages to the collector threatening her children's safety if the money was not delivered within 7 days. Every crime documented. Every threat preserved. Every lie exposed. "You are done," Rocco said quietly. "Federal prison. 40 years minimum. Mr. Moreno wanted me to tell you, death would be too quick, too easy, too merciful. You will spend those for decades in a cell thinking about the woman you tried to destroy and the children you threatened. Every single day." Derek collapsed onto the floor. He trembled like a cornered animal, his body shaking with a terror that had no end in sight. At 6:15 a.m., black SUVs pulled up to Evelyn Blackwell's mansion. The gates were still locked. Franco did not wait. The gates came open anyway. They always did for men who represented power measured not in money but in consequence. Evelyn answered the door in a silk robe the color of cream, coffee in her hand, her face still beautiful with the kind of beauty that came from generations of privilege and unlimited access to the best dermatologists in the South. "What is this?" she demanded, her voice still carrying the authority of a woman who had never been told no in her entire life. Evelyn Blackwell, an agent announced, "You are under arrest for fraud, defamation, conspiracy, and falsifying evidence in a federal investigation." Evelyn laughed. The sound echoed across marble floors that cost more than a house in the poor neighborhood where Isabella had raised her children. "Do you know who I am? My lawyers will destroy you. This is a misunderstanding. A terrible, ridiculous misunderstanding." Franco showed her a tablet. Footage of Evelyn paying a Channel 8 producer $50,000 to broadcast false information. Emails between Evelyn and Derek planning every detail of Isabella's public destruction. Financial records showing Evelyn's role in the embezzlement scheme that had funded her own philanthropic foundation, the one that bore her name, the one that took tax deductions for money stolen from the poor. And then the final blow, recorded phone calls from an hour earlier in which every single ally Evelyn had cultivated over 20 years cut ties with her. The oil executives. The real estate developers. The judges. The city council members. All of them received the same evidence package. All of them understood what happened when you struck at someone Salvatore Moreno protected. Evelyn's face drained of color. Her coffee cup fell from her hand and shattered on marble, sending brown liquid spreading across the floor like spilled blood. "Your empire just crumbled," Franco said. "Federal charges. Public arrest. Every news channel in the state will broadcast your mugshot by noon. Same cameras you used against her." At 7:36 a.m., Isabella woke to the sound of a television somewhere in the mansion. She turned on the guest room set. Breaking news filled every channel. Derek Collins led out in handcuffs, his face destroyed by the reality of 40 years. Evelyn Blackwell escorted from her mansion, her silk robe replaced by orange, her diamonds left behind on marble floors. The news anchor apologized for broadcasting false information. Isabella's name was cleared publicly. The charges against her, fabricated. The evidence, falsified. The organized crime connection, a fiction created by a woman desperate to protect her power. Isabella sat on the bed holding the gold locket and cried. Not from sadness. From relief. From the knowledge that sometimes invisible people who save others from the darkness are saved in return by someone willing to stand in the light beside them, no matter the cost. The storm outside had finally passed. The sun was rising over New Orleans, breaking through clouds that had held the city hostage for months. Family is not always bound by blood but by those who choose to stay when the storm arrives. 1 week later, the study of Salvatore Moreno's mansion held the kind of silence that comes after the world has been rearranged. Afternoon light poured through tall windows, casting everything in gold, and Isabella Hartley sat across the mahogany desk from the man who had torn down empires in 7 days. She wore jeans now. A simple white shirt. No black and white uniform. No invisibility. Salvatore leaned back in his chair, expensive leather creaking beneath him. His dark eyes held something softer than she had ever seen, not weakness, but the opposite. The strength of a man who no longer needed to prove anything. "The $200,000, he said, his voice like thunder rolling at a distance. "It's gone. Derek's assets have been seized by federal marshals. Every dime traced. You owe nothing." Isabella's hands trembled in her lap. After 3 months of counting pennies, of measuring desperation in exact amounts, the words did not land properly. "I can't accept that. I need to work. I need to earn." "You will work." Salvatore slid a folder across the desk. The movement was deliberate, controlled. But not as a maid at Bella Not. Not anymore. Isabella opened the folder with shaking fingers. An offer letter. Letterhead from a community center in the 9th Ward. Director of Operations. Salary, $80,000 per year. She read it 3 times. The numbers did not change. My mother opened that center 40 years ago, Salvatore continued. Before I took over the family business. Before everything became about power and protection. It closed when she got sick. It's been empty for 5 years. The building still stands. The people in that neighborhood still need what it was meant to be. Isabella looked up from the letter. Why are you doing this? Salvatore stood and walked to the window. Outside, New Orleans sprawled beneath December sky. Because you saved my son when you had nothing to save yourself. Because you showed me mercy still exists in this world. Because, he paused, and when he turned back, his expression was unguarded. Raw. Because my brother's betrayal taught me that family is not always bound by blood but by those who choose to stay when the storm arrives. The words hung between them like a prayer. Isabella's eyes filled with tears. She could not speak. Say yes, Salvatore said simply. She nodded. Yes. The study door burst open. Micah, age 7, still wearing the clothes Rocco had bought him that morning, navy sweater, new sneakers he had not yet scuffed, ran straight to Isabella and wrapped his small arms around her leg. Does this mean you're staying? His voice carried the weight of every child who had ever watched someone they loved leave. Isabella looked at Salvatore. His expression was hope mixed with something deeper, something that had no name. Yes, Isabella said again, her hand touching Micah's dark hair. I'm staying. That evening, at sunset, Isabella returned to the ruins of her old apartment building for the first time since the fire. Salvatore insisted on accompanying her. They stood in the ashes as orange light bled across the horizon, turning everything the color of old copper. This is where it happened, Isabella said softly. Her voice barely disturbed the still air. I stood here holding one photograph while Emma and Lucas wore borrowed clothes someone had left at the shelter. I thought we had lost everything. I thought, she stopped. I thought we were finished. What made you keep going? Salvatore asked. Isabella pulled the gold locket from inside her shirt. It caught the last light of day and glowed like something sacred. My mother gave me this the day before she died. She said it survived wars. It survived floods. It survived her family being torn apart. She said as long as I held it, I'd never be alone. Isabella opened it carefully. Inside, a tiny photograph. Her mother's face, young and unbroken. I didn't believe her then. Standing in these ashes, holding 2 children I could barely feed, I thought the locket was just metal. Just memory. But standing here now, knowing what came after. She turned to Salvatore. Their eyes met. The city seemed to hold its breath. I wasn't alone, Isabella continued. Micah needed me. You needed me. Emma and Lucas needed me. We saved each other. Salvatore reached for her hand. His touch was gentle, the touch of a man who had learned gentleness the hardest way, by almost losing everything. I was taught that survival means being ruthless. Showing no mercy to anyone, for any reason. When my brother betrayed our family 15 years ago, his voice caught. I killed him to protect what was mine. It was the worst night of my life. I thought it made me strong. But you? He stopped. The sky was turning purple now, that fragile color that only exists for minutes before darkness takes over. You showed me that real strength is choosing mercy when you have every reason not to, Salvatore said. You saved me, Isabella. On the worst night of my life when I didn't even know I needed saving. Isabella squeezed his hand. And you saved me on mine. They stood together in the ashes as the sun disappeared. Micah ran between them, picking up smooth stones and pockets of colored glass. 2 blocks away, in Salvatore's black Mercedes parked on the street, Emma and Lucas waited. Rocco sat in the front seat, the windows up, the engine off, giving them this moment of privacy. The gold locket caught the last light of day and held it. For the first time in 3 months, Isabella's hand did not tremble when she held it. 6 months later, on Christmas evening, Isabella stood in the community center she now directed in the 9th Ward. 200 people filled the space, families from the neighborhood, children in donated clothes that fit properly now, elderly residents who had nowhere else to go on a night that demanded family. The lights were warm and amber. Carols played from speakers hidden in corners. Salvatore and Micah served dinner from a long table. They moved side by side, the man and the boy, and everyone who saw them understood something had shifted in the world. Emma and Lucas, age 5 and 6, handed out toys from a pile that had cost Salvatore $3,000, though he had never mentioned the amount. Rocco and Franco, the feared enforcers who had broken men and taken secrets to graves, wore red Santa hats and made children laugh. Franco showed a little girl named Maya how to wind up a toy car so it would race across the floor. Rocco helped an elderly man named Chester into a chair and brought him hot food on a plate. Isabella watched from the doorway wearing her mother's gold locket over a red sweater that had belonged to someone else once, but belonged to her now. A young woman approached her. Mid-20s. Thin the way hunger makes you thin. Terrified the way loss makes you terrified. I lost everything in a fire last week, the woman whispered. I have 2 kids and $50 in my wallet. I don't know what to do. I don't know who to ask. The shelters are full and Isabella took the woman's hand. It was cold. It was shaking. You came to the right place, Isabella said. Let me help you. As Isabella walked the woman toward the resource center she had set up in the building's back office, she passed Salvatore. He smiled at her with pride. Not the pride of a man who owned things, but the pride of a man who had learned to build things that mattered. She smiled back. That night, as snow began to fall over New Orleans for the first time in 10 years, Isabella held her mother's gold locket and pressed it against her heart. The metal was warm from her skin. The photograph inside showed a woman who had survived impossibility. Derek Collins sat in a federal prison cell in Texas serving 40 years for arson, fraud, and extortion. His restaurant manager days were finished. His cruelty had become legend among inmates who did not tolerate men who threatened children. He woke every morning knowing that his every remaining day would be smaller than the last. Evelyn Blackwell lost everything. Her mansion seized. Her accounts frozen. Her society friends vanished like smoke. She awaited trial for fraud and conspiracy, sharing a county jail cell with 3 other women who knew exactly who she was and what she had done to someone innocent. Isabella Hartley stood in the wreckage of what she had lost and found something better. A community she was building. Children she was protecting. A man who had chosen mercy over power because she showed him it was possible. Salvatore Moreno learned that the strongest thing a man can do is not to take everything from the world, but to give everything to those who have nothing. Family is not always bound by blood but by those who choose to stay when the storm arrives. If this story moved you, hit that like button. Share it with someone who needs hope today. Subscribe and turn on notifications because tomorrow we are bringing you another story. Another reminder that mercy is not weakness. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is choose kindness when the world tells you to choose cruelty. See you tomorrow.